other communications networks aside from the emergency communications systems. Amateur radio and citizens band, that's CB radio. There's commercial broadcast, like your FM or AM. And then there are radio systems within businesses. A lot of big warehouses will use radio systems. Some of the schools locally even use the Motorola-style radio systems to communicate. Now I'm going to talk about the FCC, or the Federal, I'll write this one out, Federal Communications Commission. The FCC. So here's the thing. The FCC controls all radio communications. They are the overlord, so to speak, of all radio frequencies, and this includes everything from AM radio, FM radio, the stuff you see on TV, so TV broadcast, all of that, as well as emergency communications. We'll call that EMC, emergency communications. The FCC is responsible for allocating specific radio frequencies for use by EMS providers, and they're also responsible for providing licenses to base stations and to assigning what we call call signs. And this is really the radio frequency. The FCC also establishes licensing standards and operating specifications, and they establish limits for transmitter power output. So this becomes an issue. They basically want to kind of limit your broadcast range to what's necessary and not have you broadcasting all over the United States, for example. And they do monitor radio operations. Basically that means they can listen in to any of your radio traffic. So there are rules for talking on the radio, things like don't use bad words. There's actually a list of words you can't say, you know, on television, on public broadcasting television, and they get upset. The FCC gets upset, and they can actually fine you if you're using your radio inappropriately. So what is a base station? I mentioned this a base station thing. Well, a base station is a transmitter or receiver combination at a fixed location. This means it doesn't move. It is at a fixed location. It's used for dispatch, coordination of units, and possibly medical control. Geography and terrain are going to influence the installation. You want your base station to be basically up as high as possible elevation-wise, and not necessarily surrounded by any kind of mountainous type terrain. So basically a high point, and hopefully on a flat surface. So if this is your little mountain, you want your little base station to be right here. Nice flat terrain around it. It's up on top. The power output is between 42 and 275 watts, although it tends to be higher. Tends to be on the higher end of the spectrum here. So probably more like 100 to 200. There are some multi-channel bases. Actually, most of them are multi-channel bases this way, and they can receive on multiple channels simultaneously. So this would be like the radio in your car being able to receive, let's think of some local radio stations. You could have, I have satellite radio, but you could have like 92.5, 93.7, and you know, 101.3, and it could basically receive all of these channels at the same time, and could theoretically play them through your speakers at the same time, although that doesn't make much sense. But when you're talking about emergency communications, and you have ambulance 1 that talks on channel 1, and you have ambulance 2 that's talking on channel 2, and you only have one person to listen to all the channels, sometimes it's helpful to know that 2 ambulances are trying to talk to you at once. It can also transmit on multiple channels simultaneously. This is also very useful. Again, if you've got ambulance 1 on channel 1 and ambulance 2 on channel 2, and you need to dispatch them to the same location, you can dispatch both of the channels at the same time. You don't have to tune to channel 1 and then send them the message, and then tune to channel 2 and then send them the message. You don't have to do that. You can basically tune to channels 1 and 2 and then send the message only one time.